In this presentation, we are investigating the first step in the Dick and Carey model, identifying instructional goals using front-end analysis. More specifically, the purpose of this presentation is to consider the individual steps within the front-end analysis, or describe when one might use a needs assessment or job analysis. Remember, this is the first step in the Dick and Carey model. So it's logical to call this part of the model a front-end analysis. This is when you determine the project needs, identify your audience, and begin the process of developing goal statements. Dick and Carey used this diagram to describe front-end analysis. Let's turn it on its side so we can understand when you use these steps. A front-end analysis may be broken into several parts, which we will go over in detail, but first let's describe these parts briefly. The first is the diamond. This is the decision step, and this is perhaps the most important step in the process. It is here that we consider whether or not the situation in question is a performance problem which can be solved with instruction. Solutions to performance problems are not always apparent, and it's often the case that instructional designers are asked to develop instruction when the real solution to the problem may be something entirely different. We will investigate this issue and also consider a job or task analysis. Let's begin our performance analysis with an analysis of the problem, or do a go, no-go. It's now that we ask the question, is there a performance problem that can be solved by instruction? If so, we need to conduct a needs assessment to do an in-depth analysis of the problem. Otherwise, it would be necessary to choose some other solution to the problem. Let's take a look at an example. In this example, a visiting regional manager was visiting one of his restaurants and was somewhat frustrated to receive orange juice in a coffee cup. The next day, when he returned to the regional office, he found that the company policy was quite clear, and that it stated that all servers must give customers orange juice in a juice glass. He decided it must be that the servers just didn't know this policy. So to remedy the situation, he then decided to have the server training revised, and this was to ensure that all beverages be served in the correct type of glass. Instruction was developed by the corporate headquarters and implemented at the restaurant location, and this was accomplished at a cost of $80,000. But when the regional manager returned to the same restaurant 3 months later, he was again surprised to be served orange juice in a coffee cup. He thought he had fixed that problem, and the solution was expensive. So he asked the server why she had not served the beverage in a juice glass. She replied, "Well, I would have preferred a juice glass, but we just didn't have any. My apologies, sir." In this case, the true problem was a lack of supplies, not a skill deficiency. The server would have used a juice glass, but was unable. Thus, a barrier had prevented the correct performance. This barrier could not have been helped by instruction either. Therefore, instruction was not the correct solution to the problem. The store promptly purchased juice glasses the next day. And in this case, corporate headquarters probably did not conduct a needs assessment. So let's return to our flowchart. In this case, the restaurant issue was not a performance problem, but was due to unforeseen circumstances. An initial investigation could have prevented the development of this server training, and barriers to the performance are why one considers needs assessment. Sometimes a needs assessment is required to determine the true nature of the problem and to find an appropriate solution. Thus, it may be that a needs assessment is necessary to determine if the problem at hand can be solved by instruction. During a needs assessment, The instructional designer identifies the problem, causes of the problem, and then identifies potential solutions which could be implemented to solve the problem. The results of this analysis is a clear description of the problem, evidence of the causes of the problem, and proposed solutions in the form of goal statements, and more about that later. For now, rather than considering goals, let's consider what a need is. In short, a need is the difference between the actual situation and what could be, or the optimal situation. Let's describe it with this equation. An actual is the status of the situation as it is. An optimal is the status of the situation as it should be. The need is the gap between these two, and determining these gaps is the focus of a needs assessment. What keeps people from performing as they should? Sometimes it's because of problems with the people themselves. People can have problems with a lack of skills, knowledge, and sometimes motivation. And sometimes it's problems with the environment. Problems with the environment can be to the organization, or perhaps it's incentives. So let's return to our restaurant example. But now the situation has changed somewhat. It seems the management has developed a new menu. Given these changes, the staff would need some instruction because there will be several potential performance gaps. Cooks would need to know how to prepare the new items, and servers would need to be able to describe these new items or even how to garnish them. And these are example skill deficiencies or knowledge gaps. Given changes in the menu, we may want to do what's called a job or task analysis to determine how each job is affected. Each job should be considered to determine how the menu changes that specific job. The cook's role is quite different from that of the servers, and they will have very different learning requirements than the servers. So we will want to specify the audience for our instruction. So individual jobs should be identified and considered separately. Once we have identified the changes in individual jobs, we will want to identify performance goals given the new learning requirements. Goals are written outcome statements that should be developed to describe the learning requirements. Once goal statements are written, we will have a formal direction for our instructional solution. This leads us to another form of assessment called goal analysis. Goal analysis will be the subject of another presentation, but this should give you an understanding of front-end analysis and the components of this overall process. Let's review. We begin our front-end analysis by asking the question, is this a performance problem? As we found, there are situations, like our juice glass example, that do not require instructional solutions. They require non-instructional solutions like purchasing juice glasses. After making the decision that our issue may in fact be an instructional problem, we should conduct a needs assessment. This is to determine the actual status of the situation, or actuals, and what the ideal situation would be like, optimals. So when needs are determined to be instructional, we may want to consider a job or task analysis to determine instructional goals. It's important to determine the intended audience at this stage so we can focus on their specific needs. These needs are formally documented with goal statements. This would then lead us to a goal analysis, a process which is discussed in another presentation. So this concludes this presentation. It described the basics of front-end analysis, and it should have given you some idea how to begin the design process and how one would consider performance problems. Thank you for your time.